Okay, here we go. Welcome to the Parenting with Confidence podcast. I am your host, Teresa Alexander Inman, board certified behavior analyst and infant toddler developmental specialist. Today, I am so thrilled to have Rachael Brown, who's the author of For Fork's Sake. As F-O-R-K, I did not mispronounce anything. I want to make sure.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. Because, my son would be like, Mom, because I don't use profanity. I just feel,
Yes.
I can't even stand the thought of it. So
Right.
he would be like, Mom? It's like, no, baby, I
Yeah.
said F-O-R-K, fork.
Yes, many friends from church were like, I don't know if that's an okay title.
I think it's cool. So, yeah. So welcome, Rachael.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm glad to be here.
Oh my goodness. I'm glad we finally did this. We're
Yes.
doing it.
Hooray.
You've been so wonderful and so patient, and I really appreciate that.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah. So let's talk about your book. Explain to me, why did you write this book?
Sure. Well, first off, up until COVID, I was working with people who had chronic pain using a technique called pain neutralization technique. And it's really using your brain to turn off pain. But once COVID hit, I couldn't do that. Obviously, that was shut down. And my kids were at home. They were a senior in high school and a sophomore in high school, and they were doing school at home. And I was going a little stir crazy and trying to come up with something to do myself. And we'd been eating plant-based for 10 years at that point. But I went back and through Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies and eCornell, I got my plant-based nutrition certification. And it was a wonderful process. And I had all this new information that I wanted to share with people, but I still couldn't meet with people. And so I went back and did their food and sustainability course and got my certificate in that. And again, it was my family, I think, was so tired of hearing about food systems and food around the dinner table. And so that's when I thought, maybe I should write a book similar to what I wanted when we made this transition, because there were a lot of really scientific, heady research books. And then there were recipe books, but there wasn't a lot in between. And when I talked with parents of young kids, they were really like, I don't read a long book, I read blogs. Maybe I don't have time for that. So I wanted to create something that, would resonate with people who are just wanting to make a switch.
Which is amazing. And yes, people, because, again, my podcast is short because parents don't have time to listen to a long podcast. So,
yes. Yeah. The other thing that happened was, and I tell this story in the book, my nephew was diagnosed when we started eating this way. My nephew was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 5, and his mom was in nursing school. And she had a professor who said, have you looked at the role of nutrition in cancer? And they had a small hobby farm and they grew all their own meat. She had a big veggie garden. She taught me how to pull mozzarella cheese. And she started reading these books, and overnight they went vegan. And she said, you've got to read these. And I was so shocked that she made such a quick transition that I started reading the books and watching the documentaries. And I was just so frustrated with what I was learning. I couldn't believe that this information was out there, but that I'd never heard it. No healthcare professional had ever talked to me about food being medicine. And all those links, from, just the rates of obesity alone in children, but all kinds of issues that stem from what we are or are not putting into our bodies. So that was kind of the beginning of the journey for us now 12 years ago. Yeah.
Amazing. Now, how difficult was it to go from, meat eating, to from carnism to plant-based?
Yeah, at the time we had 13 chickens. My daughter, she sold eggs to the neighbors, and we had transitioned slowly. I would say in the beginning a little bit. Like we had gone, okay, you know what? After learning about factory farming, I don't want to support that at all. So I'm just going to get grass-fed beef at the farmers market. We had a vendor, and it was really expensive, so we just ate it a lot less. So we started making some of those moves. But then once I started reading these books, books and learning really more about what plant-based eating can do and what dairy especially and meat does to your body, it was a pretty quick transition because we set out and did like a 10-day, which is what I talk about in the book. Just give it 10 days, like do your blood work, give it 10 days, eat this way, just whole food, plant-based, no oil, and then get your blood work again. Because in 10 days, you might lose a few pounds, you might feel good, but you can't necessarily feel your cholesterol dropping, or sometimes you might feel your blood pressure dropping. But I couldn't get back in until day 17 to get my second blood draw. But when I did, my cholesterol had dropped 50 points. And at that point, my doctor said, "What did you do?" Because I couldn't get these kind of results using medication.
Mhm.
And so that really, I mean, at that point, it was like a yay. And also, oh, shoot, now we really have to do this. But that was really the beginning of our journey. But it was just so impactful to see what 10 days, 17, but really what can happen in just over a week for your body.
Yeah, and our bodies thankfully are resilient and
Yes.
will heal and will respond to food as medicine.
Yeah.
So,
It's incredible. I tell a story about my son too, because my kids were 6 and 8 when we made this transition. So it's not like they didn't know what we were doing. They were fully aware of it and they missed certain things. So I talk about, making like foods. Like they loved macaroni and cheese. So
mhm,
finding a plant-based macaroni and cheese that they liked, finding a pizza recipe, burger recipe, lasagna recipes that are just they're made with plants. There's nothing bad in them, but they then become the new favorites. And it started happening. They'd go to their friend's house and go, "Ooh, I can't wait to have regular old macaroni and cheese." And they'd come home and go, "It was actually gross." Yeah. And when you say about our bodies being resilient, we had to do a no fat thing for him because he had high cholesterol at age 10. And we'd been eating vegan, but we hadn't cut out all the fat. So we decided, let's try that and see if we can get his numbers to change. And so we did. And he came home about 2 weeks in, and we were having hummus pitas, which we do often. And he took a bite and he was like, "Oh, these are so good. What did you put in them?" And I was like, "Nothing, it's the normal stuff. But he's like, "These red peppers are so sweet." And because he hadn't been having those extra sweet things at school, brownies for birthday parties and all those things that he would get outside of our home, he'd been saying no. I'd pick him up from school and he'd bring a cookie with a forlorn look to his sister, like, "Here you go, you can have it. I can't have it." Um, but those red peppers tasted so sweet, and really learning that taste buds can change in 2 weeks. Like all of our taste buds change every 2 weeks. So you give it just a little bit of time, and it's amazing how your body will respond.
wow. See, I didn't know that about taste buds changing every 2 weeks. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I know I went without sugar for 21 days. And when I ate sugar again, I mean, to this day, I have a headache. Like this morning, I tried a new protein shake, which has 6 grams of sugar. And I love this protein shake. It is so delicious and creamy and just lovely. And I still feel it. Like my head just does not
Yes.
feel the same. And I had it this morning, and I've had
Right.
this feeling in my head all day. Just
Yes.
so it's just incredible how our bodies also tell us what we should not eat.
Right, right. There's a local plant-based pediatrician. I actually quote her in my book, and she was showing pictures recently on Instagram of her son's soccer game, and he's like 5, and they had these huge monster cookies that were like they were just so much sugar, packed with sugar, right? And that was like at the halftime, and then there was something else at the end of the game. And you just think about for us, how we that affects us, but you think a little person who's eating all that sugar and then it becomes normalized. Our bodies, things like sugar, fat, dairy products, like there are things in them that make our bodies want them. They're called the pleasure trap for a reason. But they're like opioids. They can be that strong. It can be like a cocaine addiction. Your body wants it that bad, but you just give it a little bit of time, having that break, and like you said, then a small amount, you're really aware when you have a small amount.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I remember the first time I tried sugar after that fast, I had a Hershey's Kiss and it gave me a headache. And I haven't had a headache I had not, I don't typically get headaches. And
Yeah,
that
right.
day I had a headache and I thought, okay, it's the sugar. That was the only thing that changed.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing how our bodies respond. And, because even at that time, I became a vegan because of that experience. Because I also stopped eating any meat products, like animal products. Actually, I became pescatarian then because when I
Mm-hmm.
tried chicken again, at the time I ate chicken and fish. And when I tried chicken again, it
Yeah.
made me sick. And I
Yeah.
thought I had a second time and I thought, oh gosh, no, stop doing this to yourself. But when I ate fish, I was fine. But then a couple of years ago, I ate fish. Like for a whole year, I ate fish. And every time I ate fish, my stomach got upset. So it's just like, why are you doing this to yourself? Just
Right.
let it go.
Old habits die hard, don't they?
Yeah, my
Yeah.
goodness.
I mean, it is amazing. And some of those things as adults, we have emotional ties to certain foods, that we miss or we think we need or we want. And my experience has been that with kids, they transition pretty quickly, especially if they're really in tune with the whole idea of once they get to know an animal, they don't want to eat an animal, So
Yeah,
learning that fish have feelings just like dogs and cats, they can feel things, learning some of these facts, really kids make a really quick switch on that way, they just don't want it anymore. But yeah, it is hard as adults when we're used to something, or we think we need it, just finding out that we can get all we need from plants, grains, nuts, legumes, that just really set my mind at ease. Growing kids, I mean, people of any age can get all they need just from a whole food plant-based diet. So yeah, it does help to learn the facts behind it. It makes some of those choices a little easier.
absolutely. And, people think, oh, well, we need this for, we need to eat meat for muscle building. But I think I watched a show called Game Changers,
Yeah,
and they talked about, well, the cows and the horses, look how muscular they are,
right.
and they don't eat meat.
I
They're
know,
herbivores.
right? The biggest animals on the planet, elephants, rhinoceros, they don't eat meat. Yeah, it's
Exactly.
incredible.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, so
yeah,
do we really need plants? Because I looked in your book and I was surprised to see the list of foods and the protein content in them.
yes,
It's like, wow, because some foods that I didn't even realize, I mean, it's a small amount, but I didn't know
right,
potatoes have protein. Um,
right.
I had
Yeah.
no idea.
Yeah, or oats, greens have
Yes.
protein. Yes, that, still is usually the number one question that we get from people, which is, where do you get your protein? And so, yes, I think that's on page 5 of the book because people were so curious about, well, I don't know if I'm going to make it, but we, in the US, we really don't have a protein deficiency problem. I mean, if anything, people are having too much protein, which is actually hard on your body.
Mhm.
So yeah, everybody thinks I mean, if you're protein deficient in the US, you probably are calorie deficient. Like you're not eating enough food. But if you're eating enough food, you're getting all the protein you need.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, I mean, your list is so extensive. So I would really encourage people to access that, get the
Yeah.
book and look at that because and your book is such a simple read. I just want to add that too. It's an easy read. It's comfortable for anybody who just wants information laid out in a really consumable way to
Mhm.
access. And it just makes the transition not so challenging.
Yeah, thank you. It was really designed to be that. I actually did another podcast interview, and the woman said, "I actually read your book on a 3.5 hour flight." I was like, "Perfect. That's what it was designed to be." Yeah, I wanted it to be simple enough, enough of the why, like why do we need to do this for our bodies and for the planet, and then how, like give me the actionable steps. And so yeah, it's laid out that way so that each chapter has some actionable steps you can take at the end, so you can really give this a go and see for your body what can happen in a simple 10 days.
Absolutely. And honestly, watching that show too, they tested blood immediately after eating meat and immediately after
Yes,
eating a plant-based diet, and they were significantly different.
yes,
Same
it's crazy,
person,
isn't it?
the
Yeah,
same person. And I thought, wow, I couldn't
yes,
believe it. That's when my husband became a vegetarian.
really. Good
That
for him.
show.
Yeah, Game Changers, Forks Over Knives. There's some really good documentaries that
Yeah.
are very compelling when you see the changes that people have gone through. And it hasn't taken a long time. People who are off diabetes medication, off insulin in 10 days. I had to put a disclaimer at the beginning of the book because, like, check with your physician because your
Okay.
body can change so fast. It can be a couple days and you might need to lower your medication. So our bodies are really good at responding when we give them what they need.
Yes, they are. Now, I think this is so cute because you don't, your thing is don't say vegan, you're the WFNO and the happy.
Right. Yeah.
Love that. Tell people about that.
Yeah, we get asked all the time, like our kids actually, middle school and high school, like vegan carries a pretty heavy association, I guess, with it. And so I kind of said, what do you think of when you think of vegan? And most people are thinking like, a hippie with a Vita bus and they wear patchouli oil. And I used to have a Vanagon and I have some patchouli oils, but I'm not like that's not what I mean when I'm talking about
Right.
how I eat. That can be more of a political stance or kind of your ideological thinking about what you eat. And I don't like harming animals. I'm not for harming animals, but that's not the number one reason we got into it. For us, we really got into it for the health of our bodies. And it was only after learning more about the farming practices, in our country, the CAFOs, those concentrated animal feed, I mean, huge feeding lots. And when we drive down to see my parents, we drive past some of them. And you want to make sure the windows are rolled up and you're not breathing, only through your nose for like 10 miles because it smells so bad. So learning more about those, then we were like, of course, we're in this for the animals as well. But we would describe what we do as eating plant-based. The long acronym is whole food, plant-based, no oil. But that's not something you can say easily, right?
Right.
No. So so I came up with happy, healthy and plant-powered, yay. So just to make an easy acronym to work with SAD, because SAD is the standard American diet. So going from SAD to happy is what we like to say.
Yes, yeah, and it's funny. I was speaking to somebody about SAD this morning because, she mentioned that she was constipated. I said, well, the SAD diet will do that to you.
Yes, makes you sad in so many ways.
It does. It does. She's pregnant and had these
Oh,
pains, and she thought maybe she was having contractions, only
yeah,
to find out after much investigation that she
yeah,
needed to add more fiber to her diet. And
right.
once she did that, she's been happier.
Yay. Good for her.
Yes.
Oh,
So, and there was something else too I noticed because they were talking about years ago when people ate more, from the farm, we didn't
yeah,
have these diseases that we do today. And,
yes.
and that the proof you've shown that too, because with your nephew having cancer and changing the diet,
Mhm.
what that has done. So, food as medicine is powerful.
It really is. And I love Dr. John McDougall's work on that. He did his residency in Hawaii and he worked with populations who, this is in the 70s. So, he saw populations who had come to Hawaii to work in sugarcane fields primarily. So, they were mostly coming from different parts of Asia and they were maybe the grandparents at that point, and they were living into their 90s with really no health issues. Their kids who came over with them as kids, they were eating primarily what their parents cooked for them, which was mostly food, that they would eat, back in their home country. But then by generation 3, those kids were growing up with mostly a standard American, a Western diet, lots of fast foods, lots of junk foods. And it only took 3 generations for those people to be having the same diseases as people were who were living in the Americas. So it really was incredible he watched that over the years, and just went, oh my gosh, it's just the food. That's all that's different. Everything else was the same, but just the food. So yeah, it's happened so rapidly, and just we're in the middle of it now, looking at obesity rates with children. And you look at pictures of kids 50 years ago, and they're nothing like the children that we see today. It's just so sad, and what that's setting them up for health wise, disease. The cost involved for that. It's horrible.
It is. And people argue that, well, eating healthy is more expensive than eating junk. But the thing
Mm.
is, okay, first of all, I don't agree with that because
Right.
beans are less expensive than meat. You
Yes.
Vegetables are less expensive than meat. So I don't, I've been doing this for years now, and
Mhm.
I disagree with that statement. Now, the other thing too, the long-term effects
Yes.
of
Yeah.
eating poorly.
Right. Yeah, you're going to pay for it now or pay for it later, right? Yeah,
Yes.
in healthcare or disease or all those things. Yeah, like you said, it really is. Once you take the meat and the cheese and the ice cream, all those things out of your cart, the oil, those are the most expensive things in your grocery cart. You can add in so many beans and rice and whole wheat bread and fruits and vegetables and nuts, even, and still come out ahead, really. And I talk about that in the book because there's a lot of parents out there that are concerned about the cost right now with the rising cost of food. But I love Jeff Novick did work, and he came up with recipes that you could do if you were on the SNAP program. So these meals were like $2 meals.
Mhm.
And if you only had a dollar store near you, if you were in an urban food desert, and you're not able to have a nice grocery store that has a lot of fresh produce, he would go around to dollar stores, and like I've checked in ours, you can get a bag of rice, a bag of beans, you can get, canned vegetables, you can get a lot of things, and it really is possible. Sometimes people call it peasant food. For some people, it's kind of a turnoff because it's not real fancy food, but
Right.
it's food that people have existed on for centuries, millennia, really.
And you can actually make it fancy. I'm sorry, my
You
dog
can.
turned something over. But yeah, you can make those things fancy. And when you think
True.
about it, a bag of beans, you get so much mileage from a bag of dried beans as
Yes.
opposed to canned or
Yeah.
any other way that you would get it. People prefer canned because it's fast. But there are
Yep.
other things that you have to consider when you're purchasing canned foods. So
Sure. Yeah.
dried beans are
Yeah.
a great alternative.
Yeah, and, with that, like you said, you buy one big bag of beans or a big bag of rice or pasta, whatever it is, you learn to batch cook, you learn to make big servings of things that you can then stick in the freezer or stick in the fridge. And, if you make a big pot of black beans, you can have like 8 different meals that week just from the black beans. Everything from, burritos and a burrito bowl. You could make corn bean enchiladas. You can make black bean brownies. That's a favorite around here. There's just all kinds of things you can make once you start experimenting with some of these simple, cheap foods.
Yeah, absolutely. And they are delicious. I mean, I've made black bean brownies and my husband
Yeah,
can tell the difference because I can't tell
right.
him certain things ahead of time. I just
Yes,
have to make them and he has to try them.
that's how my son was. Don't tell me if there's sweet potatoes in it. That was his big. His favorite lasagna is like filled with sweet potatoes, but he's like, no, as long as I don't know.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing, because I think it's the knowing that really gets to them because, I remember once I made cookies and one of my stepdaughters was over. And and my husband said something like, oh, she's into this gluten-free and sugar-free and all this. And I'm not about that. And he's like, and these are my favorite cookies. And I whispered to her, and they are gluten-free and sugar-free. And, all the frees that he mentioned, they were free of.
Yeah, right. And you don't know, it's like bliss, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. So,
yeah.
now he just asks, how much of this can I eat? I'm like, you can eat as many as you want because they're fine.
Exactly. I mean, that is the other thing that was a big seller for me because I love to eat. I am not going to be somebody who counts, restriction does not really work for me. So, yeah, knowing that all this food you can have as much as you want, eat to satiety. Like, first of all, it's relearning, like, what does being full mean? But,
Right.
eating this way, it's not so calorie dense. And I have another chart in the book just showing when you eat a piece of pizza, that's a lot of calories, but it doesn't take up that much space in your stomach. So you can eat way more than one piece of pizza when you're eating tons of calories, right? But if you have a bowl of soup and a salad, that's tiny amount of calories, really. You might still be hungry. You can have a second or third bowl of soup. You can have a few pieces of toast with jam on them or nut butter or whatever. These
Yeah.
are all good foods that aren't going to harm you if you eat too much of them.
Exactly. And I find myself like I do intermittent fasting. So I'll eat
Yeah.
between 12 and maybe like 5, or depends, 5, maybe 7, depending.
Yeah.
And I eat all day. And people are like,
Yeah.
how do you eat all day and not gain weight? It's the type of
Right.
foods that I eat, that make the
Exactly.
difference. But yeah, I'm like all day. People are looking at me like I walk around with a cooler with my food.
Yes.
And I'm
Yeah.
sitting in
Good for
the
you.
classroom, just finished eating my meal. Now I'm eating my snack, and now I'll have another snack. And I have
Exactly. It's so true. I talk to people about somebody's like, well, I love potatoes, but now I can't have potatoes. I'm like, no, you can have 20 potatoes if you want in one day. It's just what you put on the potatoes,
Exactly.
So you can't put cheese and sour cream on them, but put mustard or ketchup, make a cashew cheese, you can have your favorite foods just probably in a different way.
And that's the thing, just being creative. Understand? I
Yeah.
mean, my favorite, I like coconut oil.
Mhm.
I'll put coconut oil on everything. So I made popcorn with coconut oil, and my sister-in-law came and she goes, "Oh, who eats popcorn without butter?" Like, and she had it, and she's like, now she's sworn off. Like, they only eat popcorn now when they come to my house.
I love it. So I read about this about 2 years ago. We spray pickle juice on popcorn and then sprinkle on nutritional yeast. If you like dill pickles, it's so good.
Wow,
So
see,
yeah,
I
like you
love
said,
that.
getting creative. Yeah.
Yes. So I just mentioned my oil. When you say no oil, do you mean like no coconut oil or no avocado oil? Like no oil,
I
period?
I do. I know this is a hard one for a lot of people. My mom and I went back and forth because she uses olive oil on everything, and would come at me with articles and like, look, the Mediterranean diet's good. I'm like, yes, but it's all the other things they're doing. It's not the oil. So a few things about oil. All oil is 100% fat. So I'm not against fat. In reading Colin Campbell's work, he talks a lot about whole foods, right? And so our bodies do really well with all the food in a package. So avocado is really high fat, right? But it's got all the fiber if you eat a whole avocado, right? Same thing with olives. A tablespoon of olive, Christopher Carnrick, he used to teach cooking classes in Spain, and before he went whole food plant based, no oil, and he had a TV show, and he was like, there's 50 olives, depending on the type of olive, but 50 olives in 1 tablespoon of olive oil. So if you love olives, then eat olives. You're probably not going to sit there and eat 50 at a time, but
Yes.
that's your body's way of getting what it needs. But it also comes with that whole package. It's got the fiber. Your body's going to use all those nutrients differently than when you just give it straight oil. So the straight oil, it's just the same reason we don't pour oil down our drains, right? It clogs our drains. The same thing happens in our bodies. When we eat oil, it gums things up. It makes our arteries stiffer. So it's harder for our bodies to process. It has to do with our endothelial cells, and this is just it's harder on our body, and we don't need it. So you don't have to add the oil, and it's really simple for cooking and cleaning. I mean, really, when you're cleaning up, once you take out the animal products, you don't have meat spattering, fat everywhere, and you take out the oil from cooking, cleaning your kitchen is so easy. And it's the same thing that's going on the inside of your body. Your body is getting cleaned out from all that extra sludge, really, that we don't need.
Oh, wow. Thanks.
I know. I'm sorry.
That's
But I will say we tried to transition. We did avocado oil first, and then we did
okay.
coconut oil. But for me, it was all the blood work numbers. I mean, I'm the first to admit, if I went to a fancy Italian restaurant or something, I want to dip bread in oil with some salt. I love it. But we're back to that pleasure trap, right? Like, our bodies want fat because it helps us survive, right? We have these instincts that served us well a long time ago, but we don't need them. We have fat in all kinds of things these days. So we tried it, but when we get our blood work back, even if we just had a little oil, our cholesterol numbers would be super high. LDL number, I mean, things would change. So you talk about your body recovering really fast. It doesn't take long. Once you cut out that oil, your risk for those higher numbers really goes down. So we're talking heart disease, we're talking stroke. We know for diabetics, it's not actually the sugars that are hard for our body to process. That's like the end result. But the insulin is an issue because of the body having a hard time dealing with fatty products. So fruits and stuff are wonderful actually, and diabetics can learn to enjoy all kinds of foods, but it's getting rid of the fatty foods that helps their body be able to process the insulin correctly.
Gotcha. But yeah, this whole time I thought, because I have olive and avocado and coconut, and I thought, oh, well, I'm good.
I know. I wish I could tell you. I wanted to believe I was good too. But and it actually turns out that vegetable oils are actually harder on our bodies than saturated fat from animals. So they are worse for us. They higher levels of oxidization. So an inflammatory effect is what happens when we eat plant oils, and that's including fried foods, anything that you would fry, and those kind of oils. Not to mention, if we're talking environment, great swaths of the rainforest are being cut down, not just to grow cattle, but to grow palm oil. And if you look, palm oil is in everything that's packaged, it seems like. So just added fat that we don't need.
Hmm. Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, and I was actually reading something recently about avocados. Well, no, somebody told me about, and because avocados are great, but then, like you said, eating them are better than processing the oil. So when we do both, we're actually losing something.
Yeah.
And it does take a lot to grow avocados. When we look at water and all the resources that are necessary for that.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just something we don't need. Once you get used to not like once you realize, oh, I can stir fry, I can roast vegetables, I can bake. I don't need any oil or Crisco or, I don't need any of that. I can do, get creative in all these different ways that are really simple. Like instead of using, olive oil or whatever to saute, you just use water or some broth. Any kind of liquid that you like, sprinkle some herbs on with some broth, and you can roast your veggies. You can make all kinds of desserts with applesauce instead of oil, and they will still taste moist and chewy. You'll get all the same flavor profile that you would from oil, but you won't have all that just extra added fat, that you really don't need.
Wow, amazing. Miss Rachel, thank you so much for sharing all of this. And now you're going to change my life and my recipes and everything.
Of course.
Well, if there's one thing you want parents to leave here with, what would that be?
You know what? I found it easiest with our kids to employ some games and some tricks. And I write about those in the book. Just depending on the age of your child, it's pretty normal to not like something new. So I think as parents, lowering our expectation or getting realistic about expectations, like maybe your kid's not going to love sauerkraut or a beet the first time they taste it. And that's okay. It takes on average 12 times to taste something and try it to like it. And so even adults, I talk to adults who are like, oh no, I don't eat mushrooms. I'm like, yeah, but have you tried them 12 different ways since you were 12 or whenever you decided you didn't like mushrooms? So I would say, learning what's appropriate for kids at different age levels. Kids are tactile when they're little. Let them touch their food and see what colors it makes if you squish a blueberry, and, look at your tongue after you eat, a beet and those kind of things. Nibbling like animals do on their carrots, or, showing a video of a guinea pig or a bunny eating some greens, all of a sudden it becomes fun then. And I talk about some other games we used to play just sitting around the table, but I would say, number one, you're not a short order cook, so you don't have to cook your kids anything else. Make sure they're hungry when they're coming to the dinner table, and make sure they're coming to a dinner table. Like, sit down as a family to eat. Just make that a special time. And yeah, you'll be amazed what it can do for your child's health, for your health, the health of the whole family.
Wonderful. Thank you, ma'am. And I just want to tell parents, go out there and do it with confidence, because Miss Rachel has given you so many tips.
Thank you. And my kids are now 18 and 20, and they choose to eat this way. They don't have to eat this way, but they choose to now. So they know, and it's really because of how they feel.